Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the first episode of Rally Notes. This chat is part of a group that we have. It's called Onset Tennis. It's a group that Bruna and I started maybe about 6 months ago. And essentially, it's a group for creative entertainment people that are here in LA, that play tennis, that love tennis, that love to watch tennis. And we have all levels. We have from beginners, a lot of intermediates, a lot of like recreational players, all the way to some pretty high quality players, some high UTRs and stuff. We notice there's a lot of people in the industry that play tennis, whether you're playing a live ball or a USTA match or whatever, you don't really get an opportunity to speak to people. Like you don't want to be like, oh, what do you do? We really said like we need to start a group which allows that, right? Because this is just another opportunity to meet people, to create a relationship with somebody with another thing in common. And then this is called Rally Notes. It's something that Bruno and I wanted to do from the beginning. It's something that we want to do on court and off court stuff. And this is our first real off court event where we're able to talk about industry things. Maybe finding a little tennis angle to it, not always. In this case, we got very lucky because Greg, who I'll introduce in a minute, he played college tennis. He's played tennis his whole life. He just directed his first film that happens to be a tennis drama. He's in the sales and distribution part of the industry and also has multiple years as a talent manager. So let me introduce Greg Bekkers. He's our first guest on our first ever Rally Notes. Greg, how you doing tonight?
Hey, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to talk to you about this.
So Greg, first maybe tell us just real quick to get this out of the way, a little bit about your tennis career and how are you connected to tennis?
I've been playing tennis for 30 years. I started in Belgium. Then, when I was a teenager, moved to Australia for 2, 3 years for tennis and always wanted to be a professional tennis player. That was my dream since I was a little kid. So then I went over there and then I trained, pretty full time at that point I always trained full time, but when I was 16, 17, basically 4 or 5 hours a day. And then went to play college tennis over at Georgia Southern. Was there for 4 years, and then after that played a couple of futures, and tried to play some pro. But obviously playing pro is tough. I think for me, probably the big thing was I didn't have big enough weapons. I was very fast and very fit, but I hit good. But to be really top pro player, you really need like big serve, big forehand, something like that. And realistically, you also need money for tennis. You know what I mean? That's the truth. When I was playing, it easily costs 2, 3 thousand bucks to go play a future. You have to travel there, you have to pay hotel, and if you lose first round, you make about $100, $200. So if you don't, if you don't have a sponsor, which I didn't have, is you run out of money pretty quickly. So I played like a handful in Romania, like six, and then basically was like, I'm running out of money. Plus, I want to stay in America, so I need to figure out my visa situation there, and that's kind of what I shifted to. But now I still, obviously love tennis. I love what you guys are doing with on-set tennis. I think it's a really great way, not obviously just to work out, but it's the best sport in my opinion to meet people, to socialize. I love it. That's why we made a tennis film. I just love tennis, and that was the whole reason of making that film as well.
Yeah, and I could say Greg and I, we haven't been on the court yet, but I'm completely recreational player, right? Like I'm 52 recreational player. I'm sure Greg could kick, most of the group's ass if we
No,
get
it's
on the
still
court.
it's still it's still fun though. I play with
Oh,
all kinds of levels.
100%. Yeah.
I hit with my DP the other day, and he could barely hit the ball over the net. So I've kind of played with everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think for tennis, you always kind of have to play up to get better.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's certain levels that a recreational player just can't go against, but as long as the person on the other side that's better, it plays to a little lower. It could still be fun, and I'm looking forward to hopefully in the next couple months to get out there with you. So after tennis, staying in the U.S. obviously was a thing. Was filmmaking also like a part of your college? Was that part of what you
No,
wanted to
no,
do?
no, not at all. Not at all actually. At the time, I was so tennis focused all the way till grad school. And then I kind of, didn't know what to do after that, if I'm going to be honest. I wasn't sure what to do career wise. I had this one big passion, and I was trying to find something else that would excite me as much as tennis excited me. And it took me a long time to find that. I feel like I definitely I did a lot of different things. Coming out of grad school, I ran a car company at one point, which was like a logistics company, so like moving old timer cars from Europe to America. So a very different thing. And I don't even like cars. So it was just kind of something I fell into at the time. So that was my first experience running my own company. And then after that, started a talent management company. And that was way closer to what I liked. I did that for 10 years. I did, we
And
had
how did that happen? Just because it
also very unconventional. I didn't really do any type of assistantship or anything like that. I know most people you start like 2 years being assistant. So I had my brother who was an actor at the time. He doesn't really act anymore. But at the time he was an actor and he wasn't getting too many auditions and he wasn't super happy with his manager. So I told him like, I'll give it a shot. You know what I mean? I was like, how hard can it be? And it turns out it's very hard. So I started doing it to help him initially. He was my first client and then kind of grew it from there. So it was hard, like definitely with no experience, no connections, knowing zero people in that
yeah,
industry.
that's a tough market. Management at that level, your connections are so key and so important, right? And just
Yeah.
starting out of nowhere without coming up a certain ladder must have been
It was hard
really
because
tough.
I mean, luckily I had the car company at the time. So that was kind of taking care of finances. But it really took 2.5, nearly 3 years till that actually started making some decent money and started actually getting some good results. It was very hard to get it to a level where it could be a full-time thing. And then eventually we had like 4 series regulars and 60 actors. But after that, obviously I went into film sales and then now distribution and production and now directing. I think for me, like I think I I really wanted to just be involved with films. And I think when I did talent management, I thought it would be very involved in that, and it is somewhat, but you're still pretty removed from the actual making of the films because you're primarily, unless you're of course managing like directors and producers, maybe that's different. But I was doing actors, and it's primarily getting auditions. That's pretty much your primary job.
And also, I know a couple talent managers and a lot of like shrink work, a lot of like
Yeah,
babysitting,
you're
a
a
lot
part-time
of like,
therapist. Yeah,
you're
yeah.
taking care of
Yeah.
actors and it's not easy, right? Because there's a lot
No.
of egos, there's a lot of personalities.
Yeah, I mean that part was actually more fun for me, like in a way more fun because like I mean a lot of my friends are actors and obviously my wife's an actress. So I feel like I already kind of have these conversations. So that part was I actually kind of liked that part of managing because it was very personal.
Yeah.
I like that more than being an agent, for example.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just felt too removed from the actual films, which at the end of the day, that's what I love the most. So
Because sales, distribution, production, and then directing. Those are four major things that a
yeah,
lot of times are handled by different people. Even though like nowadays everybody has to be hyphenated. Like you have to be able to do multi things, or at least have a good amount of knowledge in different fields. You're kind of managing all those things right now
I
with
mean,
multiple
I'm not at
companies,
this point doing it completely by myself anymore either.
of
I have
course.
for the sales and distribution, I have two people on the team now. It's definitely different things. But to me, look, I do feel like they still, for me at least, all fall under filmmaking, the general filmmaking umbrella. And to me, I'm pretty passionate about this, about like even content that I make about this. I do feel like marketing, distribution, any filmmaker needs to know at least how that works. And I think obviously everyone has different strengths, so I'm not saying everyone needs to be directly involved in that, but you need to know what's going on, and especially nowadays, especially with how the industry has changed, I think you do have to know way more about it now than 10 years ago, for example.
At some point you got to learn it, and unfortunately a lot of times you learn it the hard way, right? Like you
Yeah.
learn it with a couple projects that you got to the finish line, and then you kind of handed it off to a sales agent, to a distribution company, and maybe you didn't get the results you hope you got. And so I feel like I know a little bit about that, and some of it was learned because we've gone through it. That knowledge is more accessible now, right? Like people are more used to people doing multiple things, right?
Also, in indie film, you're already used to it. In indie film, you're used to it. You're on set, everyone's doing multiple jobs. it's really not much different in that way if you think about it. You're still doing multiple hats after you finish the film.
I mean, it feels like tennis and filmmaking, although obviously completely different. There could be some synergy there. There could be some at least some personal
I think
way
it's
of going
similar.
about
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I think it's similar. For me, this is the closest thing I've found to tennis filmmaking, I feel like, because it's very similar to skills that you need, I think, like in terms of resilience, which is I feel like the most important skill. Like just in tennis, you lose every week unless
Yeah.
you're winning the tournament, but in general,
Yeah,
you're
you lose
pretty
more
much.
than you win.
Yeah, I think Federer had what famously 54% of his matches or 54% of his points he won. That's what it was. 54% of his points he won, which is insane to be the greatest, one of the greatest of all time, and to win only a little bit more than half your points. So I think it prepares you for filmmaking because you lose so much that in filmmaking it's the same thing, because even when you're developing it and you're trying to raise money, you hear so many no's
Yeah.
before you start actually getting any money coming in, or it's getting some yeses. So I think in that way, it's an awesome skill because it teaches you kind of just to kind of have a quick memory. Like whatever you lose, you move on.
I play a lot of doubles, but when I do singles, like you're out there on your own.
Yeah,
Like you have to have different tools, which is kind of what we were just talking about. Like just having certain knowledge and certain tools. Like you're not going to be the best at everything, but you have to be able to have the tools and the knowledge on how to operate when you're out there in the tennis court, where
yeah.
you do have a team, especially once you're playing at a much higher level. But once you're on the court, you're out there by yourself.
And it's cool too. That's similar in tennis. You have different game styles. So you have like certain volleyers, you have grinders, you have attacking baseline. It's very similar to filmmaker. Like directors, you see these video clips all the time. There's so many different ways to direct a film, and people who focus more on this, who focus more on this. There's not like one way to do it, and I think that's the industry in general. There's not one way to do it. What if anyone knew that one way? We'd all be doing that one way.
Of course. The film that you just directed, that you're currently in post-production, happens to be a tennis drama, right? Talk to me a little bit about like what the actual physical production of the film was like.
Yeah, I mean, I want to start with obviously why we chose that. I mean, obviously, everyone hears this all the time. It's like obviously, film what you know, make what you know type of thing. But it was also what we had access to. We actually started with that. So we started with that. I knew in Tijuana, where we filmed 90% of the film, we had access to a lot of locations we could use for free, like a lot. And we also had a crew and everything because Andrea's brother. So like we had already a lot of connection there. And I go to Tijuana like 4 or 5 times a year. So we had a lot of things that would help us make it at a way lower cost than I would do it in LA. In LA, it would have been like 4 times as much. So we started with that. We started with, okay, this is what we have. And then we were like, okay, let's build a story around what we have here. And then, of course, then it went to, well, what do I love? What do I know? It's tennis. So let's make a tennis story. And that's kind of what got the ball rolling. And then kind of randomly, the story of Jennifer Capriati came across. I read around that time. And I was like, oh, that's a cool story. Like if it was somewhat similar to that, but what if it was about that time in between when she was trying to come back? All the stuff we don't see on TV, because we see her come back and we saw briefly when she fell down, but we didn't see all that stuff when she went to rehab. We obviously don't know that much about. So I was like, that'd be a cool story because I'd be interested in seeing that. So I started with that. I basically started what would I want to see, and this film I really want to see. That's kind
Yeah,
of how
cool.
it's.
And for those of you that don't know, Jennifer Capriati was probably in the early 90s a phenom, Florida, like, 13-year-old, like winning
She was a
tournaments.
prodigy. She was like the next big
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And then there was issues with her and like, growing up and wanting to be a real teenager. So
Yeah.
her career kind of went to the deep end a little bit. But yeah, she was a great player. I lived in Florida when obviously nowhere near where, but it was a thing because she was a Florida phenom. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's
And
cool.
obviously,
I didn't know that the film kind of like,
very, very loosely
yeah,
inspired. It was more like that was the seed of the
of
idea. But
course.
after that, we obviously, everything else is narrative. We made all that up.
The thing with a film like this, which a lot of us have been in that situation where, it could be a commercial film where you need an actor not only to deliver a great performance, but in this case, I'm assuming that there's a lot of tennis,
Yeah. Well,
and and I know tennis players always have a thing where like, okay, how is the tennis gonna look
yeah, yeah. That was a
in a
big thing.
film, right?
That was a huge thing. I mean, I like challengers in the sense that it helped tennis become more mainstream. But the tennis was for me awful because there haven't really been many tennis films where the tennis looks good. I think just King Richard and Borg versus McEnroe was pretty good as well. But besides that, there aren't really good movies with good tennis, like at least where the tennis looks professional. So with us, like obviously casting people, which obviously Andrea, who's also my wife, she's the lead. She's obviously a phenomenal actress, but she's also a tennis player. She played junior tennis growing up, played tournaments, all that type of stuff. So the
Yeah,
tennis is
which that
also,
goes a lot to like what you started, like try to make what tools you have. I mean, I don't want to call Andrea a tool, but
no,
it's
no,
like,
it's more
look,
like I'm
she's
lucky to have her in this
yeah,
situation.
she's,
Yeah,
it's like she's, she could have been a gymnast, right? Or she could have
yeah,
been a dancer or whatever. Like
yeah,
whatever we have access to, that's a thing that we have to lean on when we're talking about these sort of budgets, right? Like these sort of budgets, it's like, it could be a location, it could be a DP. I always say like for these projects to exist, you need like two or three angels that come and basically carry the project. And that angel could be that DP that's willing to go that extra with and bring on all this gear and all this stuff. It could be a location, or in this case, Andrea, who's an experienced actress, but also could pull off the tennis without you
yeah,
having to go through this like, oh, extra tennis, tennis training, right? That
yeah,
we
yeah.
know in a low budget film, like you just don't have. And then if you're faking everything, then that's when, on screen, everything does not look good.
Yeah, it doesn't look good, and same with the guy that plays her brother, which is the other big tennis part in the movie. He at some point had two ATP points, so he played at a real high level. So the tennis looks really good, but that was really important for me because I didn't want, obviously beginners playing and just teaching them for 6 months and that's it. In 6 months, you don't know how to play tennis.
Yeah, and that's where like you see commercials, or you see films where like it's like cut, cut, cut. It's like a fight scene, right? Like sometimes like people
Yeah,
that do really good fight scenes, they breathe, and you're like, okay, that was great. As opposed to like every time something's gonna happen, there's a cut because the production didn't have time to do a proper, whatever, stunt work rehearsal, which I get it. Like on, with a low budget, a lower budget independent film, there's only so many lines you're going to fill in that budget. And a lot of times, training an actor to do something special, like it's just not there. So you have to, like again, in your case, you were able to find two really good actors that also could do tennis. So it's like, okay, here's another thing we could throw to our bag that's going to elevate the final product, and still keep us within a very
yeah,
doable budget, right?
yeah. I mean, look, you're because you're leaning on a lot of favors. Like our locations, for example, I think 21 out of 25 we got for free, which is insane. And then same with the casting crew, like everyone was paid a much lower rate than normal. But we also did make sure to give, everyone has pretty much everyone has back end as well. So like even our crew, we have like a certain percentage set aside for all full-time crew, which I think is important because you see somebody like if when a movie does really well, an extreme example is Obsession, is like, yeah, realistically, like they probably deserved back end all of them. And I feel like low budget films, like you should give, points at the back end because everyone's taking less. And I feel like, if you win, everyone should win in that way,
Yeah, yeah, no, agree.
Yeah.
Either back end, or even better, sometimes deferred payment.
Or
Like,
deferred, yeah.
yeah, because
Something.
we kind of did that on our second film when there were some deferred payments with people, head of departments and things like that. So agree. You put all your eggs, you put all your resources in getting that film made. You go all in into like, your final cut. And then, usually at that point, you haven't thought about what you're going to do with the film. You don't have any money to do anything with it. Then you're just hoping whoever's gonna come on next is gonna save all that for you. So even at that stage, were you already thinking that far ahead and knowing between all your experience in sales distribution, knowing that this has to be prepped from development all the way already thinking, possibly 2 years ahead because
Yeah, yeah.
we know these things take a couple years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've been working on that. And look, even all the content I created is also partially for helping the film because it's building an audience. So I've been thinking about this since we started this idea of the tennis films, which was like I think we started script development a year and a half ago. So that's when the idea kind of originated. And then obviously by the time we got like a finished script was like where we felt happy about it was like August, September last year. So during that whole time, we were already thinking about the marketing. So even now, obviously, we've been creating already these last 2 months social media stuff that we're not going to release till we get closer to the actual release, and when I really want to use it to increase sales and everything. So we have a bunch of that. I have some partnerships with tennis influencers already, tennis clubs that I've been going around in LA. I just met up with the Malibu one recently. So like we're going to do a bunch of in-person events as well because I think in-person events, especially because we're going to release theatrically, like that's guaranteed. So we're definitely going to do that. But I'm going to host these events at all these tennis clubs to promote the release theatrically and get all these tennis people going to see the movie theatrically.
You already kind of like thinking about that as you were developing the script, right? Like that's kind of the big takeaway here.
Yeah, and look, and I get the resistance to it sometimes too. You know what I mean? Because especially most filmmakers, you want to just focus on making the best film, which I get you. That needs your full attention, especially when you're in the middle of it. But you do have time, like you said, in development. Like there's times that you can definitely work on this. When you finish, I do feel like there's times, and you can batch your work, which is what I do a lot. So I'll use a Saturday randomly and just do like 6 hours straight of content. You know what I mean? Like I'll set up my whole month in like a day sometimes because like if you are busy, like we're in post right now and it's starting to get busier now, is you're not going to do it every day. You're just not. It's very hard to do it every day combined with all the other responsibilities that you have, and especially in indie film where you're doing multiple things. So you just gotta like I think do it in a sprint type of way, and then you can do it. I'm passionate about that. Everyone can do it, but it does take time, and it does have to be thought of very early because, like you said, like it needs a year and a half, 2 years. You need that time to do it and build it. It can't be just when you're ready to release because you're not going to be able to do enough with 2, 3 months of work. Like or you're going to have to throw money at it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to get to. A lot of times you mentioned the resistance. A lot of times the resistance is there's no money for it, right? Like going to producers and saying like, look, we're going to separate, 25, 50K to do this for the future. It's hard to do that. It's hard to say like I'm going to take away, X amount of money from right now, which we're, in need. And a lot of people say, oh, we'll get it later, right? Like we'll
Yeah.
figure it out later. That doesn't always happen. So, I mean, for me, going forward on any project, especially like if it's really, really independent like that, it's like, look, we have to separate some lines here for press now, for behind the scenes, for making of, for EPK, all these things that need to that could happen while you're shooting that you're not going to be able to do once you're done shooting, right?
That's the hard part because a lot of times when you're doing an indie film, you're putting every last dollar into actually getting it made and done, and you might not have the money. But it is important, but I totally get why you wouldn't have the money sometimes in the beginning. That's why I'm also very much a pusher of organic. I think what you can make up a little bit is just by sheer effort. If you're doing more effort than pretty much anyone doing this, then that will count.
At some point also like your actors, your talent on screen will get involved with that.
You need everyone to buy in. But I think they'll only buy in if you or whoever's leading it has a super clear path of what we're doing and if that goal is big enough. You know what I mean? Like I have a pretty big goal what I want to do theatrically with it and box office wise. And I tell my plan to all our team members. So like even in Tijuana, I have so many people that go to San Diego screenings or will bring so many people and we'll go to so many places to find people to go just organically without the ads, which obviously like we're going to do all that too, but you can't count on just ads. I do feel like that's helps accelerate what you're building. You know what I mean? I don't think you can count anymore on, unless you have a huge budget.
We all live off our algorithm, and just that's where like we get our information from, and some of it is organically, and like you mentioned earlier, the tennis influencers, which again, in this specific case is a tennis film. It could be a dance film, it could be a car film, whatever the niche is. Even though it may not be in your algorithm,
Yeah,
those content creators exist, right?
yeah.
They're there, right? And they're the ones that I feel that if you could get to, are the ones that will really help that word of mouth, right? Because that word of mouth, that organic word of mouth, is really what's going to drive, whether it's rentals or people coming out, is the thing.
Well, and I think knowing your audience, I think you just said that too. It's knowing your audience and having specific audience. I think, I mean, everyone kind of hears that, oh, dramas are really tough right now to sell. And as a sales agent, yeah, they're really tough to sell. Like even that J.K. Simmons film we had was incredibly hard to sell, and that's J.K. Simmons. That's a pretty big name. I, I mean, it helped in Europe and stuff like that, but it still wasn't amazing terms. And because it was a pretty heavy drama, it was about suicide, and it was very heavy. So dramas are tough to sell, but I think if you're an indie filmmaker, if you can, and of course I'm not saying everyone can do this, but if you can and you can make something that has a bit of a niche audience, tennis is our niche, and that's still a pretty big niche. You know what I mean? Like it's a pretty big audience. But that was also a reason that I wanted to do that, because I knew how I could market that to tennis people. Tennis people are extremely passionate about tennis. They're actually pretty opinionated about tennis films. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. Which
So
obviously,
yeah.
in any case, it could always backfire too, right? But
Yeah, yeah. Look, if
you're
they
gonna
if they
put
think
you're
that
gonna put
tennis
your
sucks, then
best
it
effort on
backfires
it.
on me.
The other thing, just in this development stage, you also have somebody like David Arquette in this film. A lot of people tell you, oh, get that 40, 50, 60-year-old white guy that has international appeal. A lot of times they take a bigger chunk of the budget. Would you recommend that in general?
I wouldn't be giving a huge chunk of your budget to one name. No, I mean we didn't give a huge chunk at all. Like so it was pretty small number, to be honest, for us.
Now, in general, do you think having a name like that, because he's a household name, right?
No, he's a big name. Even when we were filming in Mexico, we had dinner, and some random person literally just came up to him. So he's definitely like a known face. I do think it's worth it. Now, for us, it obviously our whole marketing plan isn't just him. He's just a part of our bigger plan. So I'm not going to count on one aspect to market the film. But look, he does help, and I did have conversations beforehand, just like asking names to distributors and seeing like does this guy have any value, and he does have value in that way. But again, that wasn't the only reason. Like we legitimately liked him, and he was great for the role. I wouldn't force someone into a role just because they have some sales value, because then it's probably going to suck. So it was combination like that just worked out, and it worked out that we could afford it and pay for it type of thing. But yeah, it helps, and it's helped us with distributors, so that is huge. And even James as well, James LeGros, who's another one in the movie, he's very well known in the festival circuit. Like he's won an Indie Spirit Award. He's went to South by Southwest a bunch, Sundance for a bunch of films. So even for festivals, his name has helped us a little bit already have early conversations.
In your case, you're the producer and you have the sales and distribution knowledge, right? You're like internally speaking with sales and distribution at the same time. And I know a lot of times, this indie type films, they won't talk to sales or distribution till after the fact, till after
Yeah,
you're done, right? Like
usually,
especially
yeah.
first and second time filmmakers, they get it done and then they're having that conversation with sales and distribution. What's your advice on like how early even conversations should happen with sales and
I mean,
distributors?
I think pretty early with the script already, and most salespeople, I mean, me included, but like most salespeople are actually pretty open and friendly about stuff like that.
Hmm.
About like being, hey, like this is who I'm thinking for the role. Do any of these people have sales value in any territories? And most people will actually, give you advice and tell you if it's a yes or a no for them. And I recommend going to more than one person.
Of course.
So don't just go to one sales agent and that's it. But if you do three, four people and you start seeing some overlap, you can feel pretty confident about that name if you're considering spending a lot of money on a name. I would definitely do that. It always blows my mind when someone's about to spend, like you said, some people spend a large portion of their budget on this name, and then all of a sudden they don't check it, and all of a sudden when they're trying to sell it, no one cares. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't,
no one cares because they're
nothing.
they're that actor that does this all the time, right?
Yeah, there are actors like that. Like I'm not gonna do names, but like there's actors like that that are at some point were a pretty big name and they're still considered a name, but they've been doing so many films and so many indie films that they have no value anymore. And that's the dangerous part, because then you might overpay for that and actually doesn't add any value to your film.
One thing there that you said about speaking to multiple salesperson, that's intimidating because a lot of times sales or distribution people, they won't even get back to you, right? What's a good way to get to somebody like you that does sales and distribution?
Well, I think I do think people also need to hit up more people. I think sometimes people email two, three sales agents and then they don't hear back and they kind of just call it a day type of thing. I'm even going to speak for myself, and I try to answer, but I don't always answer either, to be honest, because I get too many emails and I forget. So I think also follow up. It's a lot of people don't follow up, and I think you can keep following up. If it takes 4 or 5 times, if someone follows up with me 4 or 5 times, at some point I will answer. You know what I mean? Because I'm going to start feeling bad that I'm not answering. You know what I mean? And then I'll answer, because it's not that I'm always on purpose not answering. It's like sometimes I read it and in my mind I'm like, I'm going to answer this later because I'm working on something else or whatever, and I forget. And that happens a lot. You know what I mean? Because I know I'm not like, maybe it's just a random question and I have to actually check on this. So I can't really even answer it in the moment. And I'll forget. So I think people need to follow up more. And then B, you just need to hit up way more people. That goes for everything. That goes for us as sales agents too. Like when we look for distribution, and I don't know if Miguel is even on here right now, but I saw him for a second. And but when we sold his film, Adventure Tom, like I think we must have emailed like close to 1,000 distributors.
And another thing is that's why like the night you did that event a couple weeks ago, which was in an IRL event in real life where like 40 people showed up, how we're doing the tennis thing. These are the ways you meet people because if somebody I met at a little event we did or some of the people I met at your event, if they write
Yeah.
me tomorrow, the percentage of me answering went to like 90%.
In person, just because we're all so much consumed and email, that you get, and this goes for I feel like everyone gets tons of emails. So it's like just you start not putting faces to it, and you don't really know some of these people very well or not at all. I think the in-person stuff helps a lot. Obviously, anything you can go to in person helps a ton. I mean, I'm in New York right now for that reason, also to meet two people
Yeah,
in person, so it helps. But I think persistence is the biggest thing. I have people that only email once sometimes, and I was actually interested, and then I forgot about it, and then because I remembered, I actually did check, and I went back 2 months. I was like, oh, sorry, you know,
just to kind
yeah,
of wrap up the some of the wild card strategy. You're in post production now. The other day I saw you and some of your team were at the tennis channel. You
yeah.
mentioned some of the events you want to do. What are other things you're doing that people could be on the lookout for to support the film, right?
The tennis channel is a good example, I guess. Is we met them like 2 3 months ago, and so we had like in Indian Wells, and we had like a conversation with them about potentially streaming the movie when it comes out, and they were like, okay, send it to us when it's finished, and then we'd be interested in doing that. So that's cool, because for me, I would love that. Like the tennis audience is the one I'm most passionate about. So anything I can do there would be amazing. I mean, that wouldn't be our primary, because I don't want that as a first thing, because they usually don't pay very well. So, but that would be more a second window type of thing. But so we talked to them about that, but we also talked about them then promoting the film, and that would
Exactly.
be
That's probably
super
more
fun.
important at the beginning, right?
Yeah, and then we eventually, and through them and Steven as well, we got them on board to shoot there for an extra scene for our film, because we have a commentator scene in our film. So they basically gave us the location to shoot for free, which is really nice of them. And then we got three of their commentators in the scene, which was Brad Gilbert, Sam Query, and Steve Weissman. So like that was amazing, and that's going to help the film.
Fast forward a year from now, when that's out, any of those three guys, puts a story or something on their Instagram. That's
And
more,
live
yeah.
events. Like I've already told like Steve there, for example, I told him like, hey, I want to invite you to these events we're going to be doing at these tennis clubs, and he said I'd love to do it. So the more, and then we can create content there as well. So I can literally do a video with him there. Hey, we're here for the wild card thing. We can do whatever we want. So like the live events add additional content as well, so it can live longer. So that's a big thing that we're doing, and I think live events are going to obviously right now. I feel like you're going to make an even bigger comeback, especially the more we have AI and the more we get like what I like almost technology fatigue, and then you make it live on social media, and then you can throw money at it. So because let's say something does good organically, that would be a good time to throw ads on it. At least that's how we want to test stuff out, and then I will put some money towards the ones that do well organically.
Okay, so just to wrap it up before we go into like a quick Q&A, what should be success for, let's say, a first-time filmmaker doing an independent low budget film? Like what are you gonna call this? Oh, this was a success.
I mean, for me, like I do have a goal for theatrical to hit minimum a million box office, and I have a very specific strategy on getting there. And look, box office is really hard right now, especially for indie films. So that would be a great number, and that would obviously put us in profit already there. So it's a good goal for us. It's a big goal, and it's a very hard goal. But I do feel like the plan that we have with these live events and just the sheer amount of effort that I'm going to be doing at all these tennis clubs, like I will literally go to these tennis clubs and make all their members get movie tickets. I just feel like in general, what's a big win, I think, for any indie filmmakers, if you can make your investors their money back,
Of course.
I consider that the biggest win, because that's what gives you, in my opinion, is going to give you a longer career, because then these people might come back, they might invest again. You're going to be known as at least that filmmaker that actually made the money back. Like it's hard. You know what I mean? It's hard. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows filmmaking is a risky investment. So if you're someone that's putting all this extra effort into marketing and distribution, to me, that's a good bet.
You have to make these if it's hard to get the next one if you don't have one, right? Like at the end of the day, 2 years pass and you have that credit and you could say, look, I've delivered a film, you could see it here. That's extremely important.
Yeah, and I think them seeing all this effort, because you know this as well. Like there's so many filmmakers that usually just give it to a distributor.
Let's open up. Let's either Bruno, if you see if anybody's, I know people have been typing
Yeah, I see a
things
bunch
in
of
there.
questions here.
Yeah, how'd you prep for the tennis shots? Like, what kind of prep went into it? Did you do any storyboarding? And then, like, when you're actually out there versus like what you had planned, like, what kind of adjustments did you have to make?
Yeah. The tennis was super hard to film.
I
It's very
bet.
hard because it takes so much time. It takes so much time, like to play, like for example, to show a whole set. I mean, not a whole set, but to make it realistic and to show rallies. It took so much time. I was the most surprised with that. Now I kind of knew how long it would take because I did a short film like I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I remember thinking, damn, the tennis does not look good. Why does it not look good? Like, why did we not get enough shots, even though we spent a decent amount of time on it and we just needed way more time? So this time we did spend a lot more time. I also ran an A cam and a B cam this time, which helped a ton. I think moving forward, any tennis I would ever shoot, I would do two cameras.
So, did you
Um,
find that like that gap compared to like when you did the short and what you think needed to be? Was it just the amount of coverage you needed to?
yeah, because I didn't like how my tennis looked in the short, and I was like, it's the tennis itself, the players were good, and the tennis looked real, but we didn't have enough shots, and that was a big thing for me. So I knew I needed a lot more time, and I knew I needed probably two cameras if I was going to get enough shots. So the two cameras were huge for us, and I I didn't storyboard. I'm not a huge storyboarder myself. I did a shot list and a pretty detailed one, and I had a version of a storyboard in terms of like screenshots from different movies and different things that I liked the shots of. And then we did have like a test shoot on a court close to my place that we did with a couple of people. Like we did it with Andrea and Jeremy and basically the producer. So we did like do practice shots and like we just tested some stuff that we wanted to do. So the tennis we definitely prepped more than the rest of the shoot in that way. and even the fact that we did a whole test shoot day where we like whole day we were just shooting tennis and having them practice.
Yeah, when I met Andrea the other day at the thing, she said yeah, she played one day was like a 12-hour of tennis day. So,
Yeah, yeah.
any of us that play 2, 3 hours by the end of that, we're ready
Oh,
to pass out.
it was rough on them, especially her because she was the lead. So she like, yeah, she had like 3 or 4 days of basically full-time tennis. I mean, they weren't consecutive. Like we didn't
Yeah,
do that to her. That would have been like torture. But it was spread out and it was pretty much 4 full days that she played and she had to hit all the time. There was no CGI.
yeah,
She was hitting the whole time. And you know how it is. Like you're setting up, you're getting cold. Now she has
yeah.
to go
The
again.
sun, the thing, the
Her
that.
back, I think at one point she said her back was she could barely move one of the days. So it was rough on her.
You're
So
a great husband.
yeah, I know. She was like, yeah, and me, and like in that mode, I was like, not like being like, yeah, let's slow down. I was like, come on, just loosen up,
Yeah,
just loosen up.
more.
Let's go, let's loosen up. Yeah,
Okay, so I'm gonna ask one from Christian, who's a friend of mine, who's a writer director, and because you mentioned Tijuana, and I know Andrea's Mexican, so he's just saying like, how does sales agent mainly look at immigration related stories? Is there fatigue around that? Border stories? Because I actually also have a project that's border related. He's talking about comedy, coming of age. What's your view on that? Because your production company is also called Two Lands, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
is there a
yeah.
reference there to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's also it's really for me and Andrea because obviously she's Mexican American, and then me Belgium American at this point because I'm since the last 4 years I've been also an American citizen now. So it comes from that basically being a citizen of both and feeling like you're not one, you're just
Yeah,
part of each one. So it's a lot, yeah. So it is pretty in that way immigration focused. And how do sales agents currently view immigration related stories? They're tough to sell, like realistically. That's just how it is factually. But again, it depends what angle you put on it. You know what I mean? Like you could argue that there's a little bit of immigration related in this tennis film, which I feel like there is. Because we film in Tijuana. She's Mexican American in the story. It's, we talk about crossing the border, we show that. So I
yeah,
would say it is an immigration
yeah.
related
I
story.
would. I mean, I think
Yeah.
general audience would see that as
Yeah,
like,
but I would say it's not our focus. And
yeah,
we were very adamant, and Andrea was too. She was very adamant about it not having all the cliches of, in a lot of Mexican stories that, that make mainstream, some of the cliches that they put in there. So she's very passionate about that, and as am I. So like we don't have like in that way, we're not trying to push it in anyone's face that it's more like this is the story, this is the heart of the story, and she happens to be Mexican American and has this immigration angle to it, but we don't like over focus on it in that way. I think those stories that are purely immigration focused, I think they can be hard sells. That doesn't mean they're not beautiful and great stories that shouldn't be made. I think they should be made. I like watching them. But if we're just purely talking about sales, they are hard to sell. That's just a fact. That does, and again, doesn't mean don't make it. Just maybe make it at a responsible budget level.
Do you think this is Christian here. Do you think comedies or dramedies, there's obviously historically a room for those like Real Women Have Curves,
Yeah,
Juno in the
yeah,
summer, etc.
yeah. I love those movies.
The
Yeah.
world's going crazy for horror for obvious reasons. How does the market look like for that? Considering like my current boss produced The Breadwinner, which kind of bombed a few weeks ago. It'll probably make its money back, but it's no obsession. So if I was
Yeah.
bringing a dramedy, a comedy, if that was my way in, considering those titles I mentioned, does that give you pause, or how does the market feel regarding that?
Yeah, I mean, look, drum like as if I'll come from it from two angles. If purely as a sales agent right now, they're very hard to sell. So if someone comes to me with like a pure drama, with a no-name cast, no real niche in it, it's going to be tough for me to be like, yes, I would love to sell that. Now, if I absolutely love the movie and I just think it's such a great story, I'll probably still take a chance on it. but probably knowing that I'm not going to make a lot of money on this. You know what I mean? Or maybe it'll even be eventually a rev share thing. I don't know. So I know how the distributors are dealing with things right now, and they're super risk averse right now, because the MGs are lower. That's just factual right now. And the distributors, they're just way more scared of these type of films right now. That doesn't mean they're right in that way. Like I still optimistically, I do think there will be some pendulum swing, because some of these movies that you mentioned, I think you mentioned Juno as one, they're great films. And there was a time that people, and I still think people love these films. So I don't know why there wouldn't eventually be a bit of a pendulum swing, because now with the horror doing amazing, which it always does consistently pretty good. It's a good genre because that audience is passionate about it. But at the same time, we're probably going to see an oversaturation now, especially with this Obsession and Backrooms. You can just bet that all of a sudden now people like, let's make a horror film, let's distribute a horror film. So you're just going to see like a bunch more than normal, and then you're going to see those sales are going to at least temporarily go down a little bit, in my opinion. And then you might see a pendulum swing to drama. But look, I do think you need an angle to that, or you do need, in my eyes, some type of name for a straightforward drama.
I feel like anybody now that's not their thing, like that they don't like live for horror and like could tell you shit about a film that came out in 1997, like, not to jump into like, I'm gonna write a horror script, because that world could smell the non-horror people. And I think that has a big effect on things. So if horror is your thing and like it, and you're gonna know how to tell a good story, okay, go for it. But just to follow the trend, it's almost like don't do a comedy if you're not a comedy guy, right?
Oh, that's really hard. Yeah,
Type
comedy
thing,
and
right?
horror are both really hard. You know what I mean? Like I feel like you have to really know that genre. I think, look, as a sales agent, I like horror as well. It's great. Like I feel like it's a little, in that way, gets a little bit better numbers sometimes. But again, that doesn't mean what's working now, literally right now, will be working in a year or two. That's why, like, at the end of the day, like, no one knows what's gonna work at the end of the day. So I think if you don't like horror and you have no interest in it and you never watch it yourself, definitely don't force yourself to go make a horror film, especially if you're a director, writer. Like, make what you're good at and what you like. That at least it will have a chance. Whereas if you do something you don't even like, that's going to have zero chance.
I'm a first year student at UCLA's producers program, and recently we took a class on international financing and distribution. And we talked a lot about foreign pre-sales, and you briefly mentioned it in your talk, but I was very curious about your take on it because it is discussed as less frequently used, I think, compared to other models like equity financing and tax incentives, or even just like streamer-backed models, which arguably take away from the independent space. Um, in a way. So I was just wondering about your experience and how viable foreign pre-sales are to you, and if you found that any distributors or financiers tend to be more cautious, I guess, when approaching that sort of method.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think pre-sales used to be like obviously a huge part of, you could get a movie maybe 40-50% sometimes financed. I don't think that happens very much right now. Like, even an example, recently we had a film we were trying to pre-sell with was it Anthony Mackie, right? The guy that's I think he's the new Captain America. So we were trying to pre-sell that, and the numbers were super low, and in some cases not even numbers. Like, some were literally just flat out like, we're gonna wait to see what the movie looks like. And this was a sci-fi, and sci-fi doesn't do bad. It's not horror, but it's definitely a genre that has its own niche, its own audience, so it can do okay sometimes. And a lot of them were flat out like, oh, we want to see what the movie looks like, and then we'll see, and or the MGs were so small that wouldn't even be worth doing. So that was, for example, a tough one, and I had thought that would pre-sell a little bit better than it did. So it's very uncertain in this way. I think horror can still do well. Like, there are still good pre-sales sometimes for that. So that can still work. But other genres right now, it again depends on the cast too. Action isn't a good example. There's an actor there, I forget his name, something Kinnaman or something, whatever it was. And not a guy that I'm super familiar with just from action movies, but he pre-sells really well right now. So it's even sometimes actors that you're not even sure they're that big, but they're big in that genre. So action is a very specific genre. You can pre-sell there. So if you get these action stars that are considered action stars in that genre, you can still get some pre-sales for that. Horror is definitely more concept and script and the team behind it, because sometimes that can pre-sell even without a huge cast or without any name cast. But then it will be super dependent on the director and the script. Realistically, a first-time director, you're probably rarely going to get a pre-sale there.
Yeah, and I would say like especially like on the lower budget independent, like action, it's unless there's something, a couple angels in there that are helping make that low budget actions, it's difficult to make right, like to make look good, because normally action requires bigger budget things.
Yeah, look, it does work. There's literally companies that focus on these, I don't want to call them B movies, but like B type of action movie that are like, maybe they're anywhere in that 1 to 3 million range. You know what I mean? Which is still a solid budget. And you can make something that looks good at that. I don't think it's like you said, you can't make something at a super small budget action wise that's going to look amazing. Probably not. You're like at 200,000, probably not. But 1 to 3 million, there's companies that literally still pre-sell and they kind of keep making these movies. They only make these movies. And I know a couple of these companies and they do pretty well. Like no big wins, but no big losses. They usually make a little bit of a profit and they make the same type of movie over and over.
Hey, Greg, can you hear me?
Hey, Ken.
Hey, good to see you, my friend.
You too.
First and foremost, I follow you diligently on Instagram, and anybody who's on this doesn't, I sincerely suggest you do, because you really share a lot of great information that's super, super helpful. So I want to thank you for that. Can you speak on fourth session in, was it Backrooms? Are the big, indie successes, of the last, many, many years, I guess. Can you speak on the marketing campaign for Obsession, how it relates to perhaps what you're doing? And is there something that they did that you think is a good idea that you're going to implement?
I mean, that's tough. Because that one's such Obsession is such an outlier. I think that's such an outlier. I think there's things that we can learn from, but like the level of success that it had for sure is like, that's just an outlier. And there's a lot of things. I think it was a great film. Like I watched it. I thought it was a really good film. I'm not even a huge horror person, but this movie was really good. Everything was great. Director did an amazing job. I thought the two leads were both fantastic. Like they just killed it acting wise. So I think, first, obviously have an amazing movie, which it was. But it's not like it was a crazy concept either. It wasn't like the most original concept I've ever seen. It was just executed at a very high, amazing level. And the guy also had a built-in audience, a very passionate built-in audience, not just a built-in audience. I think that's the lesson that we can definitely learn in terms of building an audience, but it has to be an audience that is interested in your stuff. I see plenty of people that do have an audience of 500 million, whatever. They're kind of a lukewarm audience. Like they might follow them because they think this person is hot or whatever. You know what I mean? That's not a super good audience to get people like doing what this guy's audience did, where they would literally, reach out to these theaters and stuff like that. So
hey guys, can I say something just because I just looked it up? Obsession had a $20 million P&A spend.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
that's another thing that.
Exactly. But the reason that I do think they got also this much behind him is because obviously he already had this kind of thing in the works. He had his audience. He had these passionate people. He had an amazing film. Now, if he was a no influencer type of guy, no audience, he was just a first-time filmmaker with this movie, would he have gotten the exact same deal? I don't know. I don't know if that would have happened the exact same way. You know what I mean? I think this definitely got him on the radar. I think it definitely got him noticed. I definitely think it got them being a little bit more like, oh, let's take more of a risk here. You know what I mean? Would they have taken that same risk on someone with no audience? I don't think so. I just don't. But then the P&A spend obviously was huge. Like they just put so much money into it that you can't replicate without the money.
Yeah.
But I do think the things that helped him were the audience and those things. So I do think those type of things give it more of a shot, because from their perspective and from any company perspective, they're going to be like, okay, there's some built-in audience here. There's some numbers that we can count on. It's risk mitigation. And at the end of the day, like we've talked about this before, me and Edgar, is most of these people are just trying to keep their jobs, and if their movies do bad or they spend a ton of money and the movie flops, a lot of these people usually get fired and then, on to the next person type of thing. So from their perspective, they're also evaluating things like, okay, what's the risks here? And if they can find other factors besides this is a good film, then that's going to factor in. So I'm sure that factored in, and I think they've talked about that as well.
I want to thank Greg. Greg, thank you. I know you're in New York doing other
Thanks
stuff,
for having
but
me
you
on.
took the hour and 20 minutes to do this with us. I really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that logged in and came on. So thank you. And we're gonna have more of these different topics. Sometimes it's gonna be filmmaking, other times it's gonna be other subjects, other topics that have an interest for creative and entertainment people, right? So
Perfect.
thank you very much for everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Follow us on Instagram for more information and see you on the next one.